Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to the last Anchor open source gardening of this year. Don't worry, we will be back next year, and actually, that's just 2 weeks away. Is next year? Wild. My name's Alan. I'm director of DevRel at Anchor, and either side of me are all the wonderful open source people, developers who work on open source tools at Anchor, including Syft and Grype that you should be able to see on your screen right now. So we do this every Thursday, except Christmas. And we go through some of the stuff that needs discussing on the various open source projects. Some of this is raised by us thinking something needs discussion, or sometimes it's an issue that a member of the community has raised and would like us to talk about. We have a community discourse. I'll mention and show you that in just a minute, where you can tell us what it is you'd like us to discuss. We are at your beck and call here. One other thing I wanted to mention, everything that's open source is all on GitHub. So if you go to github.com/anchor, you can see all of the projects. There's loads of repositories containing wonderful open source software, much of it in Go, some of it in Python. So if you're a Go developer or a Python developer, hello, Tim, in the chat. We welcome contributions across all of the projects, really. One thing I have to mention, now I'm talking about GitHub, is we had a little milestone. Grype hit 9,000 stars this week. I know to some people they're completely meaningless, a vanity metric. I quite like them, you know. And not far behind is Syft on 6,000 stars. I remember us celebrating 6,000 stars. Gosh, that was a while ago. And you'll notice, those of you watching the stream, on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll notice it cycles through. This is just a little nudge, a little reminder about all these little tools down here that are also important. You see them listed here: GrypeDB, Stereoscope, Vunnel, and Grant, which are all key components of all of this open source ecosystem that we have here. And look, some of them are, well, most of them are less than 100. GrypeDB only 38 stars. It's woeful. We need to get that above 100 by the end of the year. Good luck with that. And yeah, just go to the project and just hit the star up there. It's easy. There's no commitment. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Right, so let's get on with it. We've got some things to talk about. I mentioned discourse. We won't mention that it went down briefly earlier. We won't mention that. But it's back up now. Thanks, discourse. Thanks, the ops there. So we've got some stuff to talk about, and as always, we go for the needs discussion link here. And I'll say hello to all of you chaps. I've monopolised the microphone there a little bit. We're 3 minutes in. Hello, everyone. Final one of the year. Has anyone got anything that they would like to raise, or is it on this list? What do you want to talk about, guys?
I think we had a comment on the discourse, like on the thread about the live stream.
Boom.
The request for input on a couple PRs. One of those, the filter unrelated fixed versions, I just wanted to sort of talk about for like 2 minutes. So I did a little review of this, and I'm gonna take back my implementation suggestion, and I'm really sorry about that. But we had talked about this. The idea is that sometimes Grype, if a severe vulnerability is sometimes backported to like a million different things, and Grype will helpfully put out all the fixed versions, and so then we find a JVM that's vulnerable to something, and we find a Java 17 JVM, and there's a patch in like 17.0.10 or whatever. But there's also a patch in like 8.0.400 because it was an important enough patch to backport, and like you're not going to go to Java 8 over the CVE, and the Grype UI appears to tell you that you should. So the suggestion we had was sorting, and I think the problem is that the list is short enough and the sorting is non-obvious enough that it just looks like the list is in the wrong order when you sort it. and it doesn't really make it clear that like the most preferred is first. And so I think we need to like try again. So I was gonna try to like prototype putting on the match details like a best patch field, and then we could like highlight that in the UI or something. Um and but I wanted to apologize because I felt sort of bad because I'm sort of asking for like a pretty thorough rewrite of this PR after we talked about it, how to do it. So sorry about that. I think it might make sense to wait for a comment from me to try the spike, but we're on holiday next week, so that will be sometime early in the new year. So if you're super motivated and want to try spiking that out yourself and see how you like it, we can get another round of feedback in. However you want to do that, but I sort of wanted to let this person know that I suggested an implementation and then I didn't like it, and I'm sorry.
Right. Yes.
Um,
Well, these things happen. Have you seen when you're thinking about like results? If I do snap find Firefox on Linux box, have you thought about like these kind of emoticon? Is that the kind of thing you're thinking of? If there's multiple, like show in some way that it's preferred. Is that what you're thinking?
yeah, and I think we also want to put it in the JSON, and so then you would have on the match details, you would say like this package matched this vulnerability. Here are the match details, and on the match details, there'll be like best patch will be like I think basically the upgrade that crosses the fewest versions. Because that would be the safest thing to go and install immediately, assuming people are doing semver, which they may or may not be. Um, but I think that would be a better implementation. And then maybe we could put like a star next to it or do something in the terminal output to highlight that. But I think it needs to be in the data model, and merely ordering the array just makes it look like we shuffled the versions if you don't know why we did it. And so I think I suggested the wrong thing previously.
I have
And
a quick question about the crossing the fewest versions. So if it was a downgrade for a minor patch, but an upgrade for a major patch, would it suggest to doing the downgrade to the minor since the
I
major is
think
more
there's
disruptive?
I think there's some. I think there's sort of two debates. Like, how do we represent this in code? Like, we need to add a field to best match, make sure it gets
Yeah.
populated. I think the actual algorithm is you always prefer upgrades to downgrades if they're available,
Mhm.
and then you always prefer the like version that's closest on whichever side you are. Is sort of my impression of it. So like if you can upgrade via a patch, do that. If you can upgrade via a minor, do that. If you can upgrade via a major, do that. If you can't upgrade at all, but you can downgrade
Do that.
via then maybe do that. Or maybe we leave it blank if there's no upgrade fix.
Right.
I don't know.
Okay.
And that subjectivity is one of the things that made me have a hard time getting started on this. But anyway, that's the top level feedback on that PR. I don't want to take up the whole stream on it, but I hadn't seen these little like green check. You can do so much in a terminal now.
Yeah, I don't know
Could-
how it downgrades. How can I do that? Can I do term equals like VT52 or something, and then snap find Firefox? Will that do what I think it? Oh no, it just knows. Snap find Firefox.
You tried
Pipe it to
term
less.
X term.
Yeah, there you go. You just get 2 stars or a star. That's how it downgrades. So
that's pretty graceful. Cool.
yeah. When they first implemented that, I was like, I love this. I love a bit of emoji in my terminal. So yeah, it's been there for a few years now. I quite like that. I've put a couple of notes in the discourse, which you'll see at the end. I mean, I can actually hit reply now, and then I can edit it. So yeah, I've made some notes. It might be a nice idea, like before anyone like has a go at hacking away on the code, is just prototype it in the Discord, well, not really in the discourse, but in the PR, in comments, like Tim or anyone could come up with, things that, come up with 3 options or something, to show what it might look like. And similarly, a snippet of JSON to show what that might look like. That might be the easier way, save you writing code over Christmas. No one wants to do that. How about that? Okay, cool. I'll take that as a yes. Silence is yes. What's next? Does anyone have one? Are we diving into these, or are we going to the needs discussion? What do you want to do, Alex?
Oh, the needs discussion. So it looks like there's a few that just recently got a needs discussion. Number 8, the top one, number 8 is Grype 86 there. I think, Will, you put needs discussion on this one recently.
Yeah. So this is something we've been thinking about forever. Basically the request here. So right now, the Grype matchers, when we match against an OS package manager package, so we find like a deb or a RPM or an APK or whatever, an OS package manager package kind of thing. We take two pieces of information into the match. We take the distro from the image, and we take the package information from the like package manager DB. Right. So like if you're on Red Hat in the image at like /etc/OS release, it will say Red Hat Enterprise Linux ID like rel 8 or whatever it says in there. And we use that to query the Grype database, and we say, okay, so you have an RPM called curl, and etc OS release says, or really a .distro object in the SBOM says you're on Red Hat. So we're going to ask the Grype database, are there Red Hat 9 vulnerabilities that affect a package named curl? Right, and that's the query we run. And the ask here, because you can put like a query string on a package URL, you can say question distro equals rel 9 in a Perl. And so the request here is, can and should we make it so that if you make like a hybrid SBOM, where like, let's say you downloaded a rel 9 RPM onto your distro, and then you also downloaded some other thing from somewhere else, like Syft could potentially put distro information in the Perl, and then we could use that as the input to the matching. See that at distro equals Alpine. And so then even if like maybe one of these is installed from a different registry, like someone needs to go get the Alpine 319 registry or something, and they manage to fix all the horrible linker errors that happen when they try to install it, then we could match it correctly. And one of the use cases this is, I think, really for is if someone has an SBOM that represents like a complex system. Like a lot of times we have like the simple case where like an SBOM is the manifest of an image. But like, what if you say we are running an Elasticsearch cluster and we want an FBOM, and there's like more than one service, and so you have an SBOM that has that if you have an SBOM with packages for more than one distro, maybe a better approach is to write down on each package where it came from and then use that when searching Grype. And I wanted to talk about this because it sat for a long time, and I wanted to try to figure out like what sort of the state of trying to get this in is. I wrote a PR for it a while ago. It's not a terribly complicated pull request. I think the question is like sort of more what should it do? Like for example, what if there's a distro name but not a version on the Perl? What if there's an ambiguous code name on the Perl? Yeah.
Let me talk to that actually real quick, because you've hit right on the head what kind of overlapping with the DBV6 stuff, which is good. So today in like Grype database schemas 1 through 5, we have like namespaces, and namespaces are arbitrary. Sometimes they're distro, sometimes there's something else, but they only have just a little bit of information in them. And in Grype database schema v6, we've entirely changed the model where now we have an operating systems table. It has the code names also in there, so you can straight up query like, hey, I want to resolve, given some arbitrary string, I want to resolve like what is Debian Trixie mean, like what does that resolve to relative to our database. And now that's possible. So a lot of the like code name or string version like things, I think have been accounted for in V6. And I want to say that was like the biggest blocker was making certain to account for that kind of stuff.
Wait, I'm confused about how accounting for that in the DB model allows us to move forward with the Perl types, because wouldn't the thing that's being encoded onto the PRL have to match what the query is expected to return the correct like operating system at the deep end of the data? Like how do we, when we're doing this encoding, right, and people are just throwing whatever metadata exists out there that could associate a package to a database, how do we guarantee that that link does exist so that we're not just totally missing, rather than going to the true source, which is like finding etsy/os and using that as the query string? Like, how do we mash up the many to one of we have many things associating to a package now versus this is the source of truth at etsy/os. This is what we're using to hit the DBV6 to get that to get that correct operating system string out of.
I think what I heard Alex say is that because the list of distros in Schema V6 is a database table instead of like a switch statement in code, you can use less complete and less regular information and still write a sensible query, right? So I could do like, join distro, right? Join distro table on vulnerability distro ID equals distro ID, where code name like Trixie or something, right? Whereas before, if I just said like, and distro equals Debbie and Trixie or something in the Perl, I wouldn't have like I wouldn't be able to construct a full distro object that would like go in the switch statement, but I could write a database query. And it might pull in more information than I want to, but it breaks an interesting assumption. And the interesting assumption is that like a combination of the package manager type you have and the contents of Etsy OS release tells us what vulnerability feed we should use. And that assumption is only kind of true, right? Like maybe people are baking their own RPMs. Maybe you got, some projects don't publish to like the main official wherever the debs go, and instead ask you to like add, you do like apt add repository or whatever the command is. So I think it gives you some more flexibility. Did I explain what you were explaining right, Alex? Where like it gives us the flexibility to have a more data-driven query from like a partial, or like maybe on Debian I have a code name and a version, or a code name and not a version.
Yeah, I just added a comment onto the because you're already sharing your screen, Alan. At the very bottom is a new comment, and it shows rather than tells. So like this is a prototype of like that operating system table. So this is like select star on table operating systems, and we have it now distilled down to this. So if you'll scroll down to a little bit, you see, Debian, there's like the code names actually, there. So the nice thing is, we can actually query up against that. And that's what's missing right now. There's a PR open for that has some of this, but I don't think it's finalized, is the a helper that takes like arbitrary strings to like resolve it to a distro. Like we have that helper function kind of buried deep in like the DBV6 package, but it's not like exposed as like a public helper or something. So that's a TBD.
Yeah.
Is there?
But we would wire that up for the Perl processing. Yeah, Chris?
I'm looking at the PRLs that kind of Will formatted in his example. And it's like Alpine dash version, Alpine dash. I can't remember. Is that our own construction, or is that actually verboten as we've read it from the metadata?
Are you talking about the September 26th example? Because
that's September 26th, where distro equals like distro dash version. Is that something that are we constructing that string ourselves, or how are we ripping that out?
Yeah. So these are being so you're saying specifically that query param on the Perl. Where does that come from?
Yeah, and then is there a standard for how that query parameter should be written so that we can like make the correct query when we're submitting that string to the database. Like I'm thinking of Will's example where we get multiple SBOMs that have been like merged together of a different system. And like, what if it's like Alpine colon version, Alpine dash version? Like we just like, I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out
Yeah.
the full vertical slice of what should all of this be encoded to some standards so that we can be sure we're getting the correct submission and question being asked to that table that you just showed.
Right.
Let me talk to the distro query param for a second, because like there being a key called distro equals something is in spec. The value, they have some suggestions in the spec about what it should be, and they're basically we're following it in Syft when we're crafting that string. So like we're crafting it in Syft to answer that question.
Right, for the distro object. Right.
Yeah, but I mean it's a little the value is a little like
Vague.
It's fuzzier. Like it can be kind of anything, and like so here like they just have the code name, and like they didn't say like Debbie and Jesse, so which means we would need to do things like make certain to query for just that input as if it was the code name, or split it by dash or maybe underscore. So
yeah, whatever it is.
So it is fuzzier, that value there.
Okay.
The second thing that's worth pointing out that's really sensitive to vulnerability matching relative to these Perl strings, because you kind of asked the questions like, what did we make up in this Perl? And there is something that we definitely made up. It's not distro. In that other example, there's one called upstream. That one is not in the spec. And we do our very best to not abuse the Perl spec. We try our very best to not put in other query params that just don't exist. This one was too useful to ignore. So what is this? Like so in OS distros, you tend to see packages they'll have origin or source, and it points to another package. And so yeah, for BusyBox bin sh, as you highlighted, like the upstream is BusyBox. So this is usually saying like, oh, there's this this parent project or umbrella repo or project that this is where we built this package from. And the reason why that's important from a vulnerability standpoint is because these origin or source packages, they are what vulnerabilities tend to be written against, not all the individual packages that come out or sub-projects underneath the umbrella project. So, losing that information if you just have Perls and that source or origin project is not actually installed as a package on your system, that's really bad because you might be missing vulnerabilities. So we decided to put this upstream query param there to capture this information at the very, very least, even though it is the one that we try our best not to do that, I'll say. So
makes sense. Okay. I had one more question about this issue because the title of it is distro matchers should be guided by package type, not by detected distro. But we've now circled all the way down to where the last comment on this is a table of potential distributions of operating systems that are going out, right? So at what point is the package type or the package manager that's been detected a pass through for figuring out what the distro is, right? So what's the nuance there of detecting the package type itself and the more information that it gives besides solely relying on Etsy OS release?
I think we should change the title of the issue and say distro matchers should be guarded by package metadata or something. And the reason package type doesn't work is like we could probably, if we all put our heads together, think of half a dozen distros that use the same package manager as each other package manager package type, right? Like Fedora and Red Hat both have RPMs, and and like dpackage, like there's a lot of overlap, like package managers and I guess package managers, package types, and distros are all related many to many, or at least potentially so. Right. Says
There's a few.
Yeah, Alan's built the web on the screen right there.
Yeah. So right. So we shouldn't use the package type, and we should go fix the title of the issue. Thank you, Chris. We should be using the package metadata.
Right, and so to take the leap forward, using the package metadata should encode distro information on the PRL, or when forming the package, we should use both package metadata and the contents of like its relative Etsy OS release to encode that on, so that that's the source of what's being used to query the DB, rather than the other like top level part of the SBOM.
I want to zoom out for just a second and say what this issue is really asking for is that if Grype has enough information on a package to know who the best vulnerability feed for that package is, that's how we should match. So the reason I make that distinction is, let's say we're scanning like a Bitnami Postgres image. And they have a vulnerability feed, and they disclose vulnerabilities, and they put an SBOM in the image, so we know sort of exactly like what we're still working on this in Syft, but like we'll be able to know like, hey, you scanned a Bitnami Postgres image with this exact version, and like there's people whose job it is to disclose vulnerabilities about this very specific thing, and like Grype should match that over like going and looking whether, let's say it's on, you happen to be like let's say they chose Debian as the base image for that, but like the Debian team doesn't have as complete a vulnerability information as the Bitnami team in that case necessarily. Maybe we should use both. But also we want to think about like, because other tools make SBOMs, right? We want to think about like, if Grype gets an SBOM with no distro block, but with enough information on the package objects to clearly say this is an Ubuntu 22.04 D package or whatever, then we should respect that and use that vulnerability feed, even if we don't have a distro object. So yeah, okay. I think the conclusion I'm getting is this was kind of blocked by DBv6, and I should go, like, I should wait for Grype schema v6 to land and then go try to rebase my PR on it, or more likely rewrite it, and then it will be unblocked. Is that that's sort of the conclusion I'm hearing? Is that what other people think?
Yes. Like there might be another one on the table here, which is like, well, is it good enough to merge with some of these caveats, and then we enhance it later with v6 codename lookup stuff? Because like, it's not like we don't already have Etsy release, the Etsy OS release information if it's already present, and if it's not present, if there is no good Perl information on the Perl, then like, so be it. We're not gonna do a good job looking that stuff up, but like, it's only going to be enhanced with the v6 data coming in. Like, so I don't know, on the table, we could try to get it in as best effort now, and then enhance it later with v6.
Okay. I guess we have to make sure as a requirement on that matching doesn't get worse. Right. So probably if I can't do a name dash version in the current PR, I'll just fall back to Etsy OS release.
Yeah. It should
so if somebody
be the
does
same.
like at so if somebody does like at distro equals Trixie and distro equals Trixie in a pen, I'm just like, I don't know, we don't have a table that says what Trixie is, so we're just going to use Etsy OS release. But if somebody does amp distro equals alpine dash 3.18.3, like, I know what that is. I can go find their vulnerability feed and match against it. So okay, cool. This seems unblocked. Thanks for a discussion. I will I'll try to get this PR rebased and end in the new year. We'll see.
Thank you.
I have one unrelated question about the v6 design. Is that the vulnerability table is using that kind of like OS table it as like kind of a side helper of like, hey, Grype has asked the question, give me all the vulnerabilities for all this information. It uses that OS table to then like filter through and then return the vulnerability list, right? It's not like we're going to ask a query, get an OS back, and then use that normalized like response from the DB to then get the vulnerabilities out, right? It's not like a two-pass thing that would happen.
Are we talking about like in the matchers themselves?
Yeah, for the matchers.
Got it.
We wouldn't do it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the matchers won't care. But like, so let's just like dive one level deeper, like the search package, the equivalent of the search package today that's doing all the work of talking with the database. Basically everything that we have, so we have a lot more tables, a lot more like foreign keys and joins that need to occur with this V6 design today. And we essentially just make certain that we're, do as few queries as possible, join when we can ahead of time, so we're not having to reach back in to the database and pull out results. I will say that one of the spots where it was, just easier to not do that was operating system. So we actually have a first we, from the search package perspective, the matcher just does one call, but from the search package it will say, oh, I've been given distro information. Go resolve the 0 to many distros that this string may represent, and then take that information and kind of affect the where clauses on the remaining searches that need to be done. So we do that one as a two pass, even though it could have been rewritten to also been a join, because there's enough like fuzzy string manipulation. Like, does this string represent a version, a code name, a label? Does it have major or minor, or does it need to be parsed? It was like just enough like out of SQL logic to be like, nope, let's just do that in a little bit of Go, do one query, resolve it to known distros, and then move forward with like the matching.
Okay.
So yeah, it does do it in two passes.
It'll be cool to see how this change and then the use of that two pass like changes any kind, like for larger SBOMs, what the effect is for vulnerability scanning. I'm excited.
Sweet. End timeout on that one.
Yep.
Do we have any others that are tagged that you would like to look at?
The ones towards the top are the ones that stuck out to me. So like the ignore Go compiler affecting CVE, or scan images in Kubernetes manifest. Those two stuck out. I don't know if anybody else had something that should reach the top of the list.
Hey, you're the boss. We'll go with what you've suggested there. So I'll just paste that in the chat and fire away.
So I can, I don't know why this is a Syft issue. I thought it was a Grype issue, but anyway, so Go and a little bit of background. The Go project has the Go toolchain, right? So you can do like Go build, Go run, Go test. But that same project also contains the Go standard library, which is statically linked into, I think, every binary built by Go. And so there's source code from the Go standard, from the Go project that ends up copied into your binary. And Go is kind enough to put metadata in the binary so that we can tell. So like every Go binary has basically a manifest of names and versions of everything that's statically linked into it, including the Go standard library. So that's thing one. Like when we find a Go binary, we're like, yay, we know all the Go packages that are in this, and Syft can raise those up. And then including what version of Go built it. And then we can, running Syft on Syft. Right. So yeah, there we go. There's the standard lib. There's a Go module called standard lib version Go 1.23.4, because that's what built the current release of Syft. The issue is that there's there's one project to report vulnerabilities against. That's the Go project. And so sometimes people report a CVE that's like the Go runtime has a memory leak, right? That's a CVE against the standard library. And sometimes they report a project like report a vulnerability like go get can be confused and download the wrong thing under these esoteric conditions. And that's a vulnerability against the Go toolchain, but they're the same project. And so what this issue is really about is if there's, let's say there's a vulnerability affecting the behavior of the go run command in Go version 123.4. I don't know of one, let's just say for the sake of argument there's one. Does Syft have that vulnerability? Or should Grype report that vulnerability based on the SBOM we see on the screen, is what this issue is asking. And it's hard because it's hard to programmatically decide that a vulnerability is against the Go tool chain and not the Go library. I think there are some suggestions for how we could do that in the comments on this issue. And then there's this sort of like philosophical position, like recommended reading the Reflections on Trusting Trust, right? Which is where the trick where the guy replaces the build server's C compiler with a C compiler that detects whether it's building a C compiler. And then if it's building a C compiler, it builds a C compiler that detects whether it's building sudo. And if it's building sudo, it always accepts the same password. And then he checks in a patch to the C compiler, and then the C compiler on the build server now has this bug. And so there's nothing anywhere in the source code, but he doesn't trust it anymore. And so we could philosophically say, like, a vulnerability in the Go toolchain that built the package affects the package. Like, we could just say, like, and I think that's the most risk-averse position to take. We could also say a vulnerability that is like, I don't know, Go test can print out too much stuff, leading to denial of service, is a stupid thing to report against a binary that's not running Go test, which is sort of the more realist, like less noise position to take. Or we could say this is an important enough question that we're going to go try to add a data source that can tell which, this is a fun little paper, you can add a data source that can tell which situation we're in. And like, I think those are sort of the three decisions that make sense to take here.
Yeah, and I think capturing these as configs, like this is a configurable thing, is consistent with what we've done in the past. Like whenever we think that, we have found plenty of situations where we have somebody who's very risk averse say, I want this behavior, and somebody who's like, I don't want the noise, I don't want this behavior. And we have already kind of deemed that both of these kinds of folks that approach us are totally valid. And we just need a config switch that says, I can switch it to that, I can switch it to that, and maybe some flavor in between. So I think taking some action where the Go matcher can take that into consideration just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think the data source we currently use, like what we pull in the GrypeDB, allows us, like, it's already good enough that we can just build that configuration into the tool and allow the user to operate on that spectrum of what you outlined, Will, of totally risk averse all the way to turn it off, I don't want to see anything, I fully trust that standard library should not be reported.
I think right now the setting we could build is basically ignore Go standard library or not. I think right now we don't have the data to say this is a CVE against Go. This is a CVE against the Go project that affects compiled binaries at runtime versus this is a CVE against the Go toolchain that doesn't. Like, I think Alex had, if we scroll up, Alex has a comment where he suggests how to fetch that data, but I don't think we do today. Could start filtering, right? If you scroll down, it says like, I'm not saying this is the April 25th comment from Alex. It's a short comment right at the bottom there. We could start by looking at the Go source repo based on affected package with information within the Go vulnerability report. So we would have to pull in an additional data source. the Go project has started publishing vulnerability data with like reachability analysis, where they say like this symbol is where the CVE is. And if you don't import this symbol, you're not vulnerable, which is really cool. And we should eventually include that anyway. But so we could try to go download that and then see if the vulnerability is reported against the Go command, then it doesn't affect things at runtime. And that might be a good default position for the switch. So one of the things I wanted out of this is like, do we want to go prototype that and see if we can make that work? Then I think we can build a sensible switch. Right now, the two positions are basically ignore vulnerabilities in the Go standard library or report vulnerabilities against the Go toolchain against my project that was built using that toolchain. Those are the two positions the switch can have today. If we want to add a middle position, which I think would be a sensible default, we have to add a data source.
Yes.
Does that
We
make
have
sense?
to add
Okay.
the Go vuln. Yeah, in order to get the symbol information, in order to get the pathing information, which is the important one, because the symbol information is not as useful for us because imagine we're always using SBOMs as input. We don't have symbols from SBOMs, so it's not. That one has been forever elusive. But like that path information that they have in these Go vuln reports, like that is very useful because if it's against the Go project and it's purely in Go / command essentially, then that can be that middle knob that could be the default. But yes, it requires pulling in those Go vuln reports via Funnel as a new provider or something. So
cool. Can we look at one real quick just so what we're talking about? I think that
it's the link to the left of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you see it has the affected package is command/go. And so that tells us that that's the package that builds the Go executable, not the Go standard library. So we could say like, oh, because it's reported against command/go, it's not a vulnerability unless we actually find the Go executable itself. So we could pull that in. But anyway, thanks. I just wanted to show this because this is a data source that's particular to the Go language that has some cool information that we don't use today. Maybe we should. I think that's sort of all we have for that. The only remaining decision is sort of, do we build the config before we build the data source? I'm kind of inclined to say no.
Yeah, I think no.
Okay.
We'll build a better thing with the data source. So,
I want to also just bring up, I thought this was the case and it's not. I'm going through the GitHub advisory database for Golang, and a lot of these things that are listed in the Go vuln, it doesn't like cross, there's no cross post between those two at all. So there's a lot of like non-overlap, and there is some overlap. Like I found entries where one exists and the other doesn't. But yeah, it's worth noting that one of these is not a canonical Go source. You have to combine both of them to get like the full surface area of vulnerabilities known in the Golang ecosystem. And I thought they were mirrored at this point. They're not.
Yeah, there's one particular gap that's worth talking about, which is because the Go project is considered a like binary that people publish. GHSA doesn't list vulnerabilities about Go itself, much like GHSA doesn't list vulnerabilities in the JVM. It lists vulnerabilities in like open source Java packages, which is great and super helpful, but it doesn't list vulnerabilities in the JVM. Sort of the same way, it doesn't list vulnerabilities in the Go project. It lists vulnerabilities in projects that are implemented in Go.
The caveat for that is that like the golang.org/x packages, like x.net, which is used almost as a standard library in some cases, is reported in the GitHub security advisories. So things that are not official canon, but still like one order separated away, are still reported there.
Yeah. Right. But there's not, yeah, that's true.
Well, interestingly, the ones referenced in this user's ticket are GHSAs. They just don't have any packages associated with them. So they're in GitHub. They're not actually attached to any.
Are they unreviewed?
Correct.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah. So we currently, I think if you tried to review one, it would get rejected.
Yeah, because there's nothing to attach it to. They don't.
Right, they don't have a
Right.
package to associate it with, or like, and that would lead it to not go under a certain ecosystem, which then it just gets lost.
Do you guys know? Do you guys know what would happen if you use the Go Vuln check tool, the official like Go vulnerability check tool, which does support a binary scanning against like this specific example? Because another way to think about convention is to say, like, what does the official tool say about it, in this case? I don't know the answer. I tried while the discussion was happening here, but I
don't remember.
Yeah, I'll take a look.
Yeah, I don't know.
We were taking a look at it. Because I've run that in the past, and like usually what I see is Go Vuln check and Grype against just if you point Grype at a Go binary, line up pretty well. I don't know in this specific case with standard lib and that. Does binary compiled with vulnerable compiler qualify as vulnerable by convention?
Yeah. That's a good question. We should put that as a comment on the issue that maybe we can it's worth taking as input what Go Vuln check does. I wonder if we could use
that comment.
Yeah.
Awesome. Are we done with that?
Yep.
Sweet. Next, scan images in Kubernetes manifests. Is this one we would like to see?
Yeah, so I added this. I think there's a comment at the bottom about why I added this. But there are that bottom comment. So there are a few situations where Syft or Grype might be asked to scan multiple images, right? You have a Kubernetes manifest, a Docker Compose YAML, a multi-arch manifest, and I wanted to discuss, like, at a high level, like, do we want to say, like, no, we scan images just like, because that's sort of what we're saying today, or do we want to try to build the UX where you can ask Syft or Grype to scan something that contains multiple image references? Like if somebody had like a Docker Compose YAML that declares a bunch of images, and they tell Syft, this is a single piece of software. Like, I want an SBOM for this Docker Compose YAML. Is that something we want to support, or would we make N SBOMs, one for each image in it? I was curious about that because we get questions about that sometimes. And I think right now the best advice is, if you're in that situation, just write a tiny bit of Python or something to scan all the images that are in the manifest or the Docker Compose or whatever, and put them in different files, and then you can feed that to a vulnerability scanner or concatenate them into an Uber SBOM or something. Concatenating them probably won't work well right now because we have like file references and like packages owning files and stuff, and that won't work if you have more than one file system in there. The paths won't be unique and it'll get confusing.
Yeah, I mean, so this is where I think Syft and Grype are kind of not equal in this respect, because of what is being produced. So from Grype's perspective, it's like, show me all of the matches. And it's, when it comes to like what it's describing, it's probably would be okay if it said, I'm describing multiple things here. Whereas with Syft, it's a lot more problematic because multiple sources in like a single SBOM ends up being essentially very difficult to express cleanly and distinctly in all formats. And so we've kind of, there's a couple of issues that have to do with multiple sources, Syft 5, 62, and 617 that really kind of touch on this, like what would the UX look like? The other part is like, how would you say, like where the, is it a directory that you output multiple SBOMs? What are the names of the SBOMs? Like it kind of turns into like, well, this just could be a little script. Whereas with Grype, it's like, well, if it was just one big report, I don't think anyone would care. It actually, they probably prefer it. And if anything, there's a really strong argument to the convenience of, given a manifest, I want to know all the vulnerabilities that you possibly know about it. Whereas for the convenience of getting a single like giant SBOM that could represent 10 things is less useful downstream. Like if anything, it's like, well, make 10 SBOMs and throw Grype those 10 SBOMs in one command, and that would, I think that's, in my head, that makes a ton of sense until there's a stronger signal for how SBOMs are really supposed to describe multiple things. There's not a lot of agreement yet on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that that's another aspect of that, is that the SBOM model is like the data model is sort of coupled to a file system. Like all the sources are a bundle of files in some way for the most part. So that makes sense.
I really do think we should have Grype accept multiple things and have it like do all those in parallel and combine their results. I think that would make a ton of sense. And thus opens the door to taking a manifest and doing the same thing. So
yeah, it expands the surface area, like the surface area of Grype's inputs too, right? Like you can say, you can just cat an SBOM into it, or you can give it this container image, or like Grype doesn't care because it knows how to do 0 to infinity number of inputs, and it just takes the source type to figure out how many number of inputs it has to do to put together in one report.
Right. It can already take a list of pearls, and if we solve Grype 86, where it gets the distro info from the pearls, then you can just make all your SBOMs and you can just dump all the pearls in a text file, one per line, and point Grype at it, and it'll just work. But yeah, I think the fact that that's possible, right? Because it's like they answer different questions. Like Syft answers the question, what is all the software and files in this file system? Which is a question that gets inherently like messy if you have multiple file systems. Right, but Grype answers the question, given a list of packages, what vulnerabilities exist, which is just multiple SBOMs is just a longer list of packages at some level. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like we want to support multi-image stuff in Grype, but not Syft, at least short term.
Yeah, or maybe put it another way, like we have thought really hard about how to do that in Syft, and we essentially said this is not worth the time to figure a lot of like the annoyances, and right. Like so we have some suggestions of like ergonomics to like output multiple things, and we just don't think it's honestly all that like we don't think a lot of folks are going to use it, and nobody's really been clamoring for that. Like if only you could template out like the 10 SBOMs, like most folks know how to write that. While loop in Bash, so it ended up being okay.
They're also already super mad at the size of some of their SBOMs, depending on the container images that they scan. So, like, if they have 3 kind of medium to large size containers in a system, and all that gets put in one document, it's like, it's not a great way to reason about the entire system when you can break it into its different services.
Also raises the amount of RAM you need to run the Syft process. I guess it could try to flush each one and delete it from RAM as it finishes or something. But like right now in SBOM, there's a second where an SBOM is entirely in memory before Syft starts serializing it, which is a limitation we'd love to remove, but that is some major surgery.
There's a fun path there, which and I think this came up in one of the previous discussions, which is like, well, okay, what if Syft had a -O SQLite, and I think the biggest problem we ran into in that conversation was, okay, which is what you just alluded to, Wells, like, okay, there's still that like one instance where we gathered everything before we started streaming to SQLite, and so we would have to give the catalogers like direct access or something to SQLite, which we don't know how to do, because say we did that, we actually have things that run after the catalogers that like they craft extra relationships. They do things like they prune packages out of the catalog because based off of like configured rules. So, that implies that if we were to give the catalogers like direct access to this thing, it's supposed to output to, say, a SQLite file that we're treating like spool, then we would have to have some interface that is a facade for that same place that we just wrote all that information to read it back out and to reason about how to do the same operations, which we don't, even though we have interfaces for it, it's not not a clear thing. So it'd be fun to have -O SQLite.
No, but I think at that point you're trying to then push the post action of information into the just in time of the catalogers, so that at exit point from the cataloger, like when they start streaming, they already have the right answer. Like, you don't build the convoluted like stream and then read again. You just push the logic that's at the tail end,
but
as far as to the being injected into the catalogers.
But there's logic in Syft that needs 2 catalogers to have finished before it can run.
Yeah, exactly.
So that so you can't like, right. And right now that's fine because we build the SBOM in memory and then run that logic and then output the SBOM.
Have we considered having some kind of in-memory database like memdb or something like that can hold it in memory, and you don't have to write it out to SQLite on disk, but it like has inbuilt the ability to do that itself if it blows up too big?
That's an interesting idea. So we just sort of, we're always doing -O SQLite under the hood. We just pass the path, like mem, I think is the magic path, where SQLite just like uses a chunk of your RAM as its database instead of having a file. And
I was thinking more of something like this, like a Go native thing, like an in-memory database.
yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, but if we have an in-memory database, like, I thought the problem we were initially trying to solve is, like, Syft has too much RAM needs. And so I don't know why an in-memory database would be more efficient than just a bunch of Go structs in memory. Maybe it is, but I'm confused.
I don't know if I have a clean example of this, but Alan, I think I see what you're saying. It's like, well, there are projects that are inherently in memory, but have the capability to spool to disk. So like, it's just not like we wouldn't even have to think about it. It's like, as far as we're concerned, Our interface is a in-memory database, but behind the scenes, it may be when it's running out of memory, hit some threshold, we'll be spooling to disk on our behalf. And that's,
we
like
ask the interface, we go, we want this, and it handles all the reads and pass offs and writes in the background that we don't have to do.
That's exactly what I'm thinking, is just like abstract that away. So for the few people who are like scanning enormous containers with giant numbers of packages, it's transparent.
Like, does this project do that? I'm trying to think of like projects that do this, and like LMDB came to mind, but that's like a purely shared memory thing. It's not it doesn't do any spooling to disk. So like, I don't know enough about this.
I don't know.
But I like the idea a lot.
I don't know.
I'm not trying to solve the problem right now. I just wondered if that was something that had been considered as part of this conversation.
Yeah,
no, it hadn't, and I like it, and I kind of want to go search for that and like add the tidbit on the issue, because we have an issue with that. That's 3263, looks like. Yeah. So I think adding that extra note in here, I don't think we got that far.
I mean, all of this is in pursuit of making the multiple source input to Grype more of a happy experience for the user, because right now it would have to be super synchronous because of the RAM needs. If you haven't even like a medium to large size container, like 3 of those in a Kubernetes system.
Yeah, I think
it needs more research.
Yeah, it definitely needs more research, but stream SBOM to disk to avoid, because we do periodically get complaints that like I tried. I spun up a little tiny EC2 instance, and I tried to run Syft, and it just gets out of memory killed. And they have been better. We had some like obvious memory bugs that we fixed, and so we get less of those now. But it's still like if you're trying to scan, like we had an issue. I forget the person had like a I don't know like a 50 gigabyte build server with like 250,000 packages from like having a package cache that had been live for a super long time. And they wanted to scan that, and the answer is go find a server with enough RAM for that file tree, and that's not a very good answer. So being able to stream would be nice, and like I agree, having like a facade where like there's like a package store or something, and like it pages to disk if it has to, like asynchronously, would be super cool. I don't know of such a project. But anyway,
Supposedly BadgerDB, Bitcast, and TiDB does this, but I have not verified this.
Nice. Okay, I think we're at end of time. I sorry to cut you off there. Are you making the notes of those possible options? Brilliant, superb. Thank you, chaps. It's been a wonderful year. I will see you next year. So thanks everyone, and we'll be on a short break over the Christmas period. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with again all your wonderful Syft and Grype issues and feedback for us. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas and get a chance to spend time with friends and family and step away from the computers once in a while. I will see you all in the new year. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to all of you as well. Cheers, guys.
Thanks.
See you soon, folks.
Take care. Bye-bye.